Hello, my name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History. And we continue our History 150 series with revolutions. So you say you want a revolution. Well, you need timing, luck, leadership ability, charisma, violence, and even more luck. Like, you want to be a Beatle? You had to live in Liverpool after the World War II victory, know how to play, at least a little bit, have charisma, meet a manager, meet a producer, have youth culture in America and Britain, have TV, have the radio, have rock and roll already ready for you, and then you had to not die, which is the story of Stuart Sutcliffe, who is really the fifth Beatle, because he was actually a Beatle. He was a Beatle before Ringo was a Beatle. And he was the original bass player. And he died. He had a brain hemorrhage. So, you have to not die. And as we're going to see, that's not exactly easy. Revolutions are big. Revolutions are like riding a tsunami, like surfing a tsunami. Like, these are not coups and revolts, which are hard enough to pull off. A revolution is way, way bigger. So, revolutions have preconditions. Like, they just don't start. The American Revolution had a large white population in the American colonies, so it was 2 million people. All of Britain was 8 million people. So the American Revolution was not like tiny compared to the home countries. It was 25%, which is pretty good. There were the British war debts. There was Enlightenment philosophy. There was victory against the French in 1763. So there was this feeling of protection where could the revolution have happened if a French army could march right down from Montreal to New York? Probably not. There was a wealthy professional class who was very jealous of their powers. The French Revolution had traditional nobility exploitation, high taxes, recent military defeats, royal financial crises, a royal social crisis, and then a series of bad harvests. The Haitian Revolution had a minuscule white population trying to rule over, with massive violence, a large, hardworking black population, a free mulatto population, all of these Enlightenment ideas that are against slavery, and then the French Revolution, which is about freedom and equality. So, the Russian Revolution has World War I as a precondition. The Chinese Civil War, but the Communist Revolution in China had all of Chinese history, a century of weakness and exploitation by Europeans or two Europeans, the wars with Japan, and then large economic inequality, large landowners who were in different alliances, the warlords, the exploitation. There's a whole lot of preconditions for a Chinese Communist Revolution. So revolutions also don't start as revolutions. There's steps that walk up. In the American Revolution, you have 1764, you got the Stamp Act. 1770, Boston Massacre. 1773, the Tea Party. There's all of these like protests and revolts and ways that the society is saying, you're in trouble. The French Revolution literally had 2 years. We date the French Revolution from 1789, but there's 2 years where Louis XVI is still king. And one of the proclamations was, "Long live the king, if he keeps his word." Like, the revolution hasn't quite been the revolution yet. Yeah, there's stuff going on. Yeah, there's like, let's have a parliament, which is like, okay, that's different. But there was a parliament. It just wasn't called. Like, it's not yet the guillotines. It's not yet the French Revolution. It's not Robespierre and Marat and Napoleon. Like, Napoleon's just a little officer in 1789, 1791. You know, that's not to minimize it, but it's not yet the thing we remember. The Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1802 is anti-slavery, but still pro-French. It spends more time from 1791 to 1802 fighting the English and the Spanish than it does overthrowing the French. In fact, the French Revolution ended slavery. The Haitian Revolution becomes the Haitian Revolution when Napoleon's brother shows up, when Napoleon tries to reconquer the island and reimpose slavery and reimpose his economic system. That doesn't mean there weren't massacres. There wasn't the anger at the small white population for all of the violence they were treating the slaves with. That certainly happened. And hey, that was certainly going to happen. Like, you know, there's a quote that I came across in my research, which was like, other whites were like, those French guys in Haiti are sitting on a volcano. Like, the population of whites to African slaves to black slaves was the ratio was way too off to maintain control. There was too much violence. It was too awful. Like, other people saw it coming. So what do you get? You know, you play with fire, you get burned. So before you can have a revolution, there are demands to fix the system, and those have to fail. There have to be demands for changes, and those have to fail. There are acts of defiance that are met with resistance and violence and not negotiations. So the idea is you can't get change any other way but by throwing off the system. Now, the problem with being a leader of the revolution is you are very likely going to end up dead. Either by the Ancien regime, the old government, trying to maintain its power. Those are the conservatives. By definition, they're trying to, even if they're a liberal government, they're still trying to hold on to power. So they're the conservatives in this argument because they don't want to change. And they're going to try to kill you. Or there's the more radical progressives on your left who want you to go further. You know, there's not just Medicare for all. There's also, let's nationalize the healthcare system and make all doctors government employees. If you go, well, that's a little far. I don't know if we could do that. Now you're a traitor to the left. Meanwhile, the right that wants to maintain a system, all those healthcare executives want to get rid of you too. So it's you are very likely to be stuck, especially early in a revolution, in a bad place. You need charisma and authority and revolutionary faith. We see this over and over and over again. You have to really believe in a better world. You have to really want it. You have to not be betrayed. And you have to lead the winning faction. Right? Lenin's in charge of the Bolsheviks, but there were the Mensheviks. They were revolutionaries as well. They didn't want to go as far, but it doesn't matter. They still were revolutionaries. Then there's the Republicans in the Russian Revolution, those who wanted to get rid of the Tsar, but then have a kind of Western-style republic. And then there's the monarchs, the people who didn't want to change at all. The monarchists who wanted the Tsar. So, and the monarchists started with the guns. So, you have to be able to lead the winning faction. And that's not always clear. If you look at the civil war in Syria, no one could predicted who was going to win that war at the start of it. In fact, the faction that won wasn't even a faction when it started. It becomes an amalgamation of different factions later on. You have to not be betrayed by either your allies or by your enemies. You know, that's Robespierre is killed by the revolution. Marat is killed by the revolution. You know, so Robespierre killed his own allies. You know, revolutions are chaos. And chaos can be a ladder. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, that's our story of Littlefinger. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail. We just talked about that. We literally just talked. They start climbing and like, I'm going to lead. And they slip. They fall. They're dead. And they never get to try again. The fall breaks them. The ladder is real. The climb is all there is. So lots of groups want change. And you have to ride that change. The American Revolution is no different. They were all, the Southern slave owners are not the same as the Boston merchants, who were certainly not the same as the New York Loyalists, much less the Long Island farmers, much less the Pennsylvania Dutch outside of Philadelphia, the Quakers. Like, all of these groups want different things. And so you have to ride that change. And as things change, as luck changed, as battles changed, as power changed, you have to ride that or get eaten by it. I mean, we have an entire musical about Alexander Hamilton, who got eaten by the revolution. And you go, oh, well, he got killed in 1804. We had the Constitution. Yeah, but we didn't know what the country was going to look like by then. Right? We already had a government. We had a revolution. Then we had a government. We got rid of that government to create a new government. And the third election failed. Like, the first two is, okay, the system worked for Washington. The moment Washington steps down, there's chaos in the electoral system. That the system they built didn't work. So, what's going to happen? There's the Whiskey Rebellion, there's Shays Rebellion, there's rebellions throughout America after the revolution. The revolution was still going for certain groups. So Hamilton is killed by Burr. Thomas Paine is pushed to the side as too radical. I mean, there are letters in the 1820s I have a book of letters between Jefferson and Adams, who were friends. They had a falling out over the elections, but as old men, they came back together. And there's letters between them where they're still mad at Thomas Paine for being a pain in the butt, for being too radical. Like, imagine you were an 80-year-old man still mad about the dude in your 20s that was too leftist for you. And writing to your friend who's also in his 80s about that friend, and him writing back, "Oh my God, I can't believe that guy. Oh, he was such a Bernie bro." Like, guys, you were presidents. You were founding fathers. What are you doing? Why are you still mad? But the revolution wasn't dead yet. It was still living on in the people. And they were still, even in the 1820s, fighting about it. How do I know? Because Andrew Jackson came along and changed popular politics again. He broke the system that had existed. So you have to, lots of groups are going to want change over a long period of time. And you have to ride that change or get eaten by it. Hitler and Mao took over their parties. Hitler was not an original member of the German Socialist Workers' Party. He comes in later. Mao's not an original leader. Hitler had the long knives. Mao has a cultural revolution to try to keep him in power. He was being pushed to the side by the 1960s. Leo Ventura and Napoleon had to win battles and gain the loyalty of their soldiers. Almost all the French and Russian leaders at the start of the revolution are dead by the end. Whether they're killed by in the early days of the revolution, or they're killed by Robespierre and Lenin, or they're killed later on by Napoleon and Stalin, by the conservatives who come in. Like, Littlefinger doesn't win. He's killed by his own dagger in the show. So even he gets eaten by the change. And we can debate whether we like what happens to him or not. But we also, I mean, if you're watching the show, you know he's going to be eaten by the revolution. He has to be eaten by the revolution. So basically we know his ending. We just have to debate how well the TV show did in telling that story. And that's a debate of taste and desire and ability and all kinds of other things of whether they pulled it off. But Littlefinger, there's limits to how far Littlefinger can go. Because for Littlefinger to win, you need the massive change of everything. So what do you need to lead and survive a revolution? You need charisma. Hamilton, Jefferson, you have to have charisma. People have to like you. People have to flock to you. Otherwise, you're just one of the crowd. You're a nobody. You have to be able to get up and speak. You have to be able to get people to follow you. To look at Donald Trump, he can be a revolutionary figure. There are members who follow him, people who follow him, who want him to be a revolutionary figure and are mad he's not more of a revolutionary figure. But part of his thing is his charisma. He's able to get up on stage and 5, 8, 10,000 people who have been waiting for hours to see him are enthralled by what he has to say. That's why one of the biggest charges in the 2024 election season was people are bored. They don't like the show. They're leaving. And he was furious at that. Furious. Because that charisma was the most important aspect of power. Without it, Donald Trump is just another rich dude with ideas. Who cares? Like, why him? Part of why him is the charisma. Why him? You need authority. See Washington. People followed Washington no matter what. That's the brilliance of Washington is not as a military leader. The brilliance of Washington is to hold an army together even though it keeps losing. And then to still have the respect of Congress, of a whole group of other leaders. That's the and then after the revolution, to stop a military coup from happening, the Newburgh plot, where the army literally came to him to lead a revolution against Congress for their back pay, and then be unanimously elected by the states to be the first president. Like, you need that kind of respect. And there's a lot not to like about Washington. Just read. Just read Charnow's giant biography of him. There's a lot there that you could read and just read between the lines and just be like, wow, Washington was just Washington. Why was he like that? But part of why he was like that was to give off that authority, to give off that sense. So you need that. You need to be able to project that you are a leader. You need luck. Lots of luck. Like we talked about that with the Beatles. You need to be in the right place at the right time. You needed to know John Lennon. You needed to not have a brain hemorrhage. You needed to know how to play music. Because when Paul McCartney comes along, Paul McCartney wants to create what he called a cracking band. So you needed to be able to play. So you need just luck and luck and luck. Like, how many drummers did the Beatles go through before getting Ringo? Like, you need to be. What if you were born 5 years earlier or 5 years later? You missed out on the whole thing. Right? You need the right time and moment, and you have to see it, and then you have to seize it. You need a decisive action, what the photographers will call the decisive moment. You need to be able to know what's going on, to see the moment and then the rise. You need to understand politics, both overt and especially subvert. What are people feeling? What's going on? Because the overt politics is a chess match, right? You're playing it against the king. You're playing it against the government. You're playing it against maybe other factions. But then there's a subvert. What do people want? How do they feel? What's going on? Where is the economy going? Where are the people going? Are they going to the left? Or are they exhausted and moving to the right? Are they moving to be more conservative? Are they done with the revolution? You have to be able to know, because if you keep pushing and they don't want it, you're done. But if you don't push far enough, like the people want more, you're Chuck Schumer, if you've just been watching. People who are mad about the Elon Musk cuts the government and want Democrats to respond, to fight back. When Chuck Schumer said, well, I'm going to vote for whatever the president wants, they were apoplectic. Like, Chuck Schumer's done. He's not getting elected. They're talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running for Senate against the majority, the Senate Democrat leader. Like, that's insane. Like, that's not a guy who gets primaried, especially primary to his left. But he played the overt politics. Well, if the economy implodes, then my donors will lose lots of money. But he completely misunderstood the subvert politics, which the Democrats want fighters. So it's really fascinating to see. If you're in this class, there's a lot going on right now in America in the first 100 days of Donald Trump's second term. There's a cultural revolution. There's an economic revolution. There's a trade revolution. And then there's the forces that are fighting back against those organizations. And a bunch of the old guys who are used to very standardized politics are proving not to be up to the moment. Schumer doesn't have the charisma, has lost the authority, has no luck at the moment, is not seizing the moment for opposition. Compare that to Bernie and AOC. Compare that to Pritzker in Chicago, who are out there, who are mobilizing groups, who are speaking to 10,000 people. I mean, even Tim Walz is around again on tour. And who would have thought the failed vice presidential candidate would draw a crowd? But he is. He's getting on TV. Someone wants to hear from him. You also need to be diplomatic. There's lots of factions. And those factions are always in play. They're always moving. The revolution is a vibe. Revolutions are emotions. So you need to be able to play different groups. You need to be able to placate different groups who want different things. You need to know what you've got and what you can do. Or again, you're Robespierre. You're murdering your enemies to your right when your enemies to your left are out there. Or you're murdering your enemies to your left and there's enemies to your right out there. Which gets us to, you need to be willing to use violence, but also know when not to. The French Revolution, the Terror, and it was called the Terror at the time. Like, talk about, branding. Went too far. We see this with Caesar. We see this with the age of civil wars in the 1st century BC with Marius and Sulla. And you had to be willing to use violence to take over the government. But you also had to know when not to use violence, when not to go too far, when not to murder more people or more enemies, when to be restrained. So again, back to the subvert culture. What are people willing to respect? What are people willing to accept? And then you need enemies to fail. You need them to be the opposite of these things, lacking charisma, lacking authority, just missing their opportunities on luck, rolling snake eyes, rolling natural ones instead of nat 20s. You want a revolution? You got to roll some nat 20s. And for those of you who know D&D, you know what I'm talking about. You got to roll the best thing you can roll. And you need your enemies to miss, to be bad at their jobs. Revolutions start out weak. We talked about coups and revolts. Both of those look like they could be revolutions, but they're small. One is within the palace. The coup is within the government. It's people close to the leader who are like, the leader is failing. We need to push him aside. The revolts are bigger. Tens of thousands of people who want the system to change, but they don't want to overwhelm the system. They didn't want to get rid of Henry VIII. They just wanted Henry VIII to change, which is, problematic. He didn't want to change. But they didn't have a lot of other ways to do it. But revolutions start out weak, and so losses are easy. Washington could have been captured on Long Island. Washington is captured on Long Island. Had the British just put their fleet there, in Brooklyn, in the East River, in New York Bay, Washington is done. He's able to escape. He's able to use a fog. He's able to get his army across. But that you're on Long Island is bad. That's bad. How are you going to get an army off an island versus the best navy in the world? So the British had to fail. The only reason Yorktown happened was because the British lose a naval battle to the French. And then the French are able to cut off naval access, British naval access. Again, the British have the best navy in the world. That shouldn't have happened. What if the British win at Saratoga? They had the better army. They were winning. Until Benedict Arnold kind of saved the day. But the British were winning. Like, you need your enemy to mess up. Because we talk about, there's a description of the American Revolution, which is 30% wanted the revolution, 30% didn't want the revolution, and 30% could go either way. At the beginning of the revolution, it's not a third. It's like 80-20. Most people don't want... If you told people 2% of the population were going to be killed and, 100 towns were going to be burned to the ground, most people would say, yeah, I don't want that. Thanks, John Adams. I don't want to be besieged in Boston. Thanks very much. I'm not looking to be in the movie The Patriot in a couple hundred years where my town gets burned to the ground. Like, they wanted the king to be better to them. That's it. They were all royalists. Okay, Sam Adams wasn't. But John Adams probably could have been convinced to stay loyal if the king was better at diplomacy, was better at understanding the subvert politics of the American colonies. I mean, Washington was in the Royal Army. Good or not, he was. So you need your enemies to fail, which gets us back to luck. So you need a lot of abilities to lead and survive a revolution, but you also need the people who are against you personally, whether they're on your side at the beginning or not, to mess up. But if you survive, you're the hero father of the new nation. Washington, Napoleon, Lenin, Mao, Bolivar, O'Higgins, Lucius Brutus, who founds the Roman Republic, the king killer, the savior of Rome. Like, you could go see Napoleon's tomb. It's on display. It's heroic. Lenin's a little more complicated, but Lenin's only complicated because the Soviet Union failed. But Lenin was a hero. Even today, you'll get people who are like, that's Stalin. He was bad. But Lenin, Lenin was all right. Lenin wasn't so bad. Lenin believed in the revolution. You'll get people who hate Stalin, but will give Lenin a pass as the guy who overthrew the monarchy, who overthrew the Tsar. Bolivar, O'Higgins in Chile. But Brutus, Lucius Brutus in 509 BC, the founder of the Roman Republic, the guy who kicked out or led the rebellion, who kicked out the Etruscan kings. 500 years later, his ancestor, Marcus Brutus, has to kill Caesar because Caesar was acting like a king. And what do Brutuses do? What do Bruti do? They're king killers. They're Republicans. They don't ally with kings. They save republics. They're the So if you're Marcus Brutus, I feel it was a long time where I didn't, and I don't know if most people don't. Like they know Brutus et tu, Brute, that Brutus kills Caesar. He leads the palace coup to kill Caesar. And they might know that he's kind of a son, adopted son, because Caesar spends a lot of emotional energy with Brutus's mom, Marcus Brutus's mom. Like he's his mistress, but like not a mistress, but more like a second wife. But think of your Brutus. Once I put two and two together, I feel bad for Brutus. Why? Because he's got all of this history, 500 years of history. Like, how do you be a Washington? How do you be the grandson of George Washington during the American Civil War? How? The country your father created is coming apart at the seams. So, how can you be an ancestor of Lucius Brutus, the founder of the Republic, the king killer, and then be allied to somebody wanting to be the new king of Rome? Like, and then it's your stepdad who's doing it. Like, that's even worse. How? And so he picked the Republic, and it makes sense because you can imagine all of the subvert culture of people of the elites going, Brutus, you're a Brutus. You're descended from Lucius. You're descended from Lucius. You're a founder of the Republic. You could be the second hero of the new nation, the second father of the country. You could be the second savior of Rome. You can't ally with Caesar. You're Brutus. And dude, Caesar should have seen it coming. Right? The E2 Brute. Oh, and you, Brutus, you did it too. Of course Brutus did it. He's the ancestor of Lucius Brutus, the king killer. Dude, way to be not self-aware at the moment when you needed to be self-aware. And I know it's just a quote from Shakespeare, but it's emblematic. It's a great, if you read William Goldman's Adventures in the Screen Trade, in screenwriting, he says, there's truth and then there's believability. And the E2 Brute just feels its believability, whether it's true or not. And it's probably not true, but it feels like it should be true. And that's all right. But like, if you survive the revolution, I mean, you're one of those few people who get remembered forever. Forever. Who get loved by millions. So thank you very much. Be safe. Be careful. Yeah. If you survive a revolution, you could be a beetle. How crazy is that? So be careful.